Namaste to all of you. Let me tell you something about spiritual understanding. We understand a lot of things in life. This is one subject where I feel most of us lack. Most of us claim that we are spiritual, we know what the spirit is or what the soul is, but when you ask them, they're confused. They're confused. The mind is such that it accumulates knowledge from all over, from all mediums, from books to internet to whatnot, and stores that in its memory. Reasons, analyzes, evaluates, and then what we have are from our intellect, we become an intellectual on the subject that we are interested in. But how well do we understand that subject is a different issue altogether. The mind first knows, then understands, then experiences, then realizes, and then becomes wise on that. That is the process of the mind. In short. But understanding requires intelligence. Knowing requires borrowed knowledge. From borrowed knowledge, you can become a scholar, imitating what you have learned from here and there. But understanding, say in a class where a teacher is giving out a chapter to 40 students, each one will understand differently. And same is the case with, say, a preacher giving a disciple to hundreds of disciples. Again, understanding in each will be different. So understanding is a very important factor. It requires your individual intensity of intelligence. Individual intensity of intelligence. So understanding creates that difference between the intelligence and the intellect. And to the extent what happens is, in the Vedas of the Hindu philosophy, Pragnanam Brahman is the first Mahavakya, the first great saying. And in Pragnanam Brahman it says, divine is that intelligence. Insight is Brahman. Insight meaning that inner intelligence that you have is what is going to create your individuality, is what is going to create your uniqueness, not the borrowed knowledge that you have through your intellectuality. So, a lot of importance is given to intelligence. It is intelligence which makes your mind aware, which is prior to consciousness. Only after the mind becomes aware does it become conscious, and experience to infer and become wiser. So, intellect versus intelligence. Once you understand that, you will understand what I am trying to emphasize upon. That is understanding. That is understanding. Spiritual understanding. There's a huge amount of gap. We do understand a lot of things in life, but when it comes to spiritual understanding, most of us claim that we are spiritual. But when you ask them what is the spirit, what is the soul, what is awareness, what is consciousness, etc., even science is not aware of it. Even science is many a time silent on the soul and consciousness, though science is trying its best through its quantum mechanics, where they are going deeper and deeper into the subatomic particles and realizing that besides physicality, which is related to physics, which is the head of science, of all branches of science, they are realizing the importance of metaphysics. Metaphysics, which was a subject of spiritualism, where you are not concerned with the physicality. Physicality was an optical illusion, because deep down we are merely waves of energy, changing into particles as and when there is an observer. And the particles forming atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, molecules into mass, matter, etc., to appear and disappear. But the waves of energy are eternal. So the metaphysics is becoming a very important aspect of science today. It is still in its nascent stage. It still does not know how we experience. It still does not know what exactly is consciousness. How does it emerge in the mind? What happens? And they have to give evidence for that. Spiritualism, the subject of spiritualism, is the subject of life, which says that divine intelligence which human beings have, which they can see externally, see meaning intelligently, decipher externally as well as internally, which other living creatures do not have. It is responsible to make the mind aware and conscious, and then the mind goes into the subconscious level in auto mode. So it's very important. Understanding is that aspect which is lacking in spiritualism, which we all should understand with clarity. Unless we understand in clarity, how can we understand the integrated unit of body, mind and soul? We all know that we have body, mind and soul. Body is gross energy, layers of gross energy, and mind is subtle energy, and the core is the soul. So, not even motivational speeches or spiritual methods, which we call as spirituality. Spirituality is a flow, is a process of spiritual methods, exercised and engaged by the mind. It has got nothing to do with the spirit. Spirituality is a flow, out of which we go into higher consciousness to become spiritual, but we still do not enter into the core. The core is the soul, which does not require any experiencing, which does not require any effort. Motivational is by the mind, to motivate you. And motivation comes out of a desire from the mind, out of which you experience, and then you become wise, by which you learn how to silence or still your mind, how to relax your mind, how to relax your body through meditation. These are all spiritual methods of spirituality, which is not much to do with the subject of spiritualism. Yes, the subject of spiritualism involves all these, but it is not the primary factor, it is the secondary factor. The secondary factor is, after you have understood the subject of spiritualism, which is the spirit, who you are. Until and unless you do not know who you are as the spirit, what good is spirituality going to do for you? What good are spiritual methods are going to benefit? In what way? And it is very evident. Since the last 3,000 years, human beings have been practicing spiritual methods. How far have we succeeded? How evolved or transformed have we become? We are still primitive. We still are a beast with animal instincts, only concerned about a me, mine and myself, like animals are. There's no difference. Yes, we are refined materialistically with digitalization, artificial intelligence and whatnot. We have lots of technology and comforts because of our superior brain. And that is why in the Hindu philosophy it is said that art thou. You are the divine. You have that phenomenal mind by which you can explore and discover. the universe, the world, everything. It is this divine intelligence which reveals everything to you. And after that, the intellect and the memory takes over. But we are concerned only with the intellect, only with the thoughts. Only with the thoughts. And that is why there are two I's in the subject of spiritualism. I am that. Now, what do you mean by I am that? The lower meaning of I am that is a false illusion. It's a false illusion. It is a bundle of thoughts giving you a lot of ideas about your attachments, about your clinging to this and that. It is to experience life in duality, this and that, divine and devil, good and bad, positive and negative, happiness and sadness. All these things, these are meant for the smaller I, to experience the duality of life. The process of spirituality and materiality, that is also dual. Consciousness is also dual. You have to be conscious of either of, say, heat or cold, hot or cold. Duality. Life is dual. Language is dual. Thoughts are dual, relating to its opposite. Until and unless you relate to its opposite, the mind cannot function. The mind has to relate. The mind meaning the cognitive mind, the subconscious and the conscious mind. But it is the spirit which activates, which triggers, which ignites the cognition. Otherwise, our brain is mechanical. Our eyes are mechanical. Like a telescope or a periscope or a microscope, whatever you may call it, it is that conscious principle. It is that aware principle. It is that intelligent principle. That insight which is that wakefulness, which makes the brain conscious, which makes the brain alive. So the spirit is that wakefulness. The spirit is that force of energy from which the field of conscious energy emerges. Every energy has a potent force and a kinetic field. The field is consciousness. And it is a misnomer that it is the ultimate and it is the most important. No, it is a field of energy which collapses after you die and goes into the universe. But the spirit, the aware energy, the intensity of energy within the brain is non-dual. It has got nothing to do with duality. It settles in the soul. And the soul is individualized, so it's a notch less than the spirit. It is individualized. And from the soul, what happens? It only witnesses in purity and totality. It is not connected to the cognitive mind. It simply watches and witnesses. That is why a soul is also called as the witnessing consciousness, pure consciousness. Because there is no duality in it, there is no separation in it, there is no segregation in it. And what happens? Then it goes, makes the mind aware, only if it is attentive, and after that it goes into auto mode, the subconscious level. Randomly, recklessly, flowing here and there. Multitasking, confirming the second law of thermodynamics, that the flow of energy goes in entropy. The flow of energy goes in entropy, meaning in disorder. So thoughts are in disorder. Thoughts are always in disorder. In a disorderly manner they are flowing here and there. And you have no control over it. You are being used by it. You have become a slave of your thoughts. Become a slave of your thoughts. Entirely because thoughts or mind or body, that's not you. That's yours. You say my mind, my thoughts, my body, my hand. You do not say I am mind. You do not say that. So, you are not the mind, you are not thoughts, you are beyond that. And that beyond is in the mind, the superconscious section. With the thoughts, there are no thoughts. It's the silent zone where the soul resides. And in the soul, it contains the spirit, the cosmos, the cosmic energy, the universal intelligence. Like an antenna, the soul is transmitting and receiving cosmic energy. And through that, it makes the mind aware. It's that wakefulness. It's that wakefulness. So when motivational speakers speak, it is to motivate you. It's got nothing to do. They do not talk about the spirit. To the extent that if you go into YouTube and try finding out something about spiritual understanding, I don't think you'll find a single video on that. Nobody wants to speak about spiritual understanding. I do not know why. That is the most important. After your eyes have captured the information through its neurons and neural pathways, and the awareness has given you that knowing, now you need to understand. The awareness has to intensify in its spontaneity. Thoughts, intellect are of the past. Memory is of the past, projecting that in the future. It is the awareness, the intelligence which is in spontaneity, which is in the now, which is the most important. Because it's the present which will become the past. The past was once the present. It is the present which will become the future. The future is the past present. Everything is present. It's just been segregated. Either chronologically, psychologically, or whatever. It's the present which has been segregated for the convenience of the mind into space and time. The universal energy is not connected to space and time. It is only connected to the eternal now, existential now, as it is, the way it is, which we do not bother about, which we do not try to understand. And understanding in spiritualism is very important, because without understanding, you're a follower. And that is what over 90% of the world, I would say 99% of the world, are blind followers. We are simply following, gossiping, rattling, chanting what we know or what we have heard from others, or what we have read, or what we have seen on WhatsApp. There is no creativity in our mind. That is why a scientist is not a scholar. He's a doubter. He doubts everything. He does not follow anything. He does not follow what the science has done earlier. He tries to improvise on that. And how does he improvise? Bingo, I've got it. In spontaneity, in the now, eureka, in a flash, it comes into his mind after having worked so hard for maybe say years or days or whatever. So, I'm sorry. So, what happens? One has to be very careful on this bundle of thoughts which we call as I. We have to go into the other I, the bigger I, which is the soul, which is the true self, which is the witnessing consciousness. And inside that, soul is also a part of the mind. And inside that is the spirit, which has no I. It is universal. It is universal. It awakens the soul. That is why you never say activating the soul. It awakens the soul and it activates the mind. It does to both. It is prior to consciousness. That is who you are. Presence of aware energy. It is that I-ness which you need to understand. That beingness which unfolds and unravels everything which is there in this universe. If that I-ness, if that beingness was not there, if that presence of beingness was not there in that mind, we would not know anything. We know the universe because our beingness says so. We know everything that is around us because of our beingness saying so. It's our beingness which tells the mind, which makes the mind aware, and after that conscious, and after that subconscious. So, how important is this I-ness? Much more than your I, which we are totally ignorant about. And that is why this world is distorted. It is prejudiced. And it is confused. The mind is confused. First, it is confused that it does not know its own real self. It survives in illusion. Now, illusion does not mean that you're not real. Sorry. Illusion means what seems to be real is not real. What you think is real is not real. The real is that aware energy. The rest just appears and disappears. In that beingness, in the presence of that beingness. And we are confused as to who I am. After that, we are confused as to what is the subject of life, the most important factor of our life. The metaphysics, not the physics. The physics will give you only about the body and the mind to a certain extent. That also to a certain extent about the mind. It will not go beyond, because beyond is that conscious principle, which artificial intelligence as yet cannot even think about it. So we are far away from that conscious principle. So we need to understand. We can't practice. We can't practice awareness. We cannot practice soulfulness. We have to awaken the soul. Practice is a method done by the body and the mind for transcending higher. So there's confusion in spiritual understanding. There's further confusion by religion and motivational speakers. Spiritualism speaks about oneness, about universalism, about centrism. And religion speaks about segregation, separating one religion to other. Talks about human gods. This talks about intelligence as the God, the supreme ability of energy. Pragnanam Brahman. Brahman means energy. Energy means like Brahman is one without a second. All that exists is Brahman. Similarly, now quantum mechanics says on the same lines, inspired by the Vedas, it says in quantum mechanics theory that all that exists is energy, in matter as well as consciousness. Both are the same. Both are energy. So this third confusion, religion and motivational speakers have further confused our mind. Many motivational followers think that they have become spiritual. They are not. So we desperately require that clear-sightedness through that insight that we have, so that we can acquire self-knowledge. And through that self-knowledge, we acquire self-awareness. And from self-awareness, we self-awaken that soul to self-experience and self-realize and get away from our self-centeredness. That self-centeredness has to dissolve into that beingness where there is no self, where we are ready to accept everybody dispassionately. Dispassionately means to be sensitive to everything that is around, not to a select few, or not to be compassionate. Even in compassion there is a selection of an emotion, and passion is further intensified. So we have to be very careful in the subject of spiritualism that we do not follow. A guru will add prefixes in front of his name by calling himself Mahatma, Swami, Satchitanand, Guru, Sadguru, Shri Shri, Bhagwan, etc., etc. They'll keep on adding prefixes, whereas spiritualism only speaks about the NESS, the intensity of that intelligence within you, awareness, consciousness. spiritualness, wholesomeness, oneness. It is concerned with the suffix. That is why. And they all provide not the knowledge. The knowledge is first, fine. You have to acquire that externally. But inwardly, once it goes inner, into your inner self, into your inner mind, then that knowledge from the memory has to be understood. You cannot be like a parrot, just repeating what you have heard. So, please remember, understanding, and especially spiritual understanding, which I am devoted to this subject, it is extremely important. Please try to understand the subject of life and understand it with your own individuality, not what has been told to you. Thank you very much for listening. Namaste.